Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheilla. And our story today is called There Is a Way. You know, there's a Bible verse that talks about that. It says, there is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof is destruction. Ooh. Well, it was one of the few perfect days at the coast. The sun was shining. It wasn't really windy. It was beautiful. Well, Craig and Brett and Craig's big brother and their family were all on a trip. It was Sabbath morning, and they were on their way to the little church that they were going to visit. Well, that morning passed very quickly, and soon they were down on the beach with their picnic lunch. It was just perfect. They were having such a good time. Oldest brother was looking around. They finished eating, and he and the two younger boys got up. I think we should go for a hike on the beach. Well, Dad was right behind them. Pointed, he said, we should go that way. But Dad, he looked at him and he said, he didn't say anything yet. And then he said, you know, there's a meeting this afternoon at the church that I think you guys would all enjoy. So I think you should go a shorter way. Well, the oldest brother, he looked at his dad and he kind of straightened up and he said, what's wrong with going on a hike? We don't want to sit in any meeting. Well, then Father said, well, I don't think you should go, but if you insist on going, you need to go the other way. And the oldest boy, he looked that way. He said, it's not going to take us long to get there. And Dad said, that's the exact reason I say you should go that way. Well, Craig and Brett and the oldest boy, the story doesn't tell us his name, they started down the beach in the direction that Dad had said they should go. And in a half an hour, they were at big, high cliffs. And on one side was the ocean, and on the other side were these big, tall cliffs. They couldn't go any further, or they thought they couldn't. They stood there frustrated for a little while. It had only been a half an hour. Now what could they do? They looked at the ocean, and then they looked up at those high cliffs. And the oldest boy said, why don't we climb the cliffs? This'd be great. And the two younger boys agreed immediately. So the oldest boy started climbing. And at first, it was real easy. There was lots of jagged rocks sticking out. They could hold on to them tightly with their hands, and it gave them foot places to stand. And they thought, this is great. So then, pretty soon it was getting harder and harder to find a place to put their hands and their feet. And it was getting harder and harder to go up there. Well, the oldest boy, he was ahead of the younger boys. And all of a sudden, his foot missed one of those rocks. And he flung out and around. And all he could see was that ocean behind him. And now the water was coming up closer and closer to the bottom of those cliffs. Those waves, now they looked small because they were so high up in the air, but they were splashing against the rocks that hadn't been covered with water before. The oldest brother, while hanging there, suddenly he remembered God. And from the bottom of his heart, he prayed, "Oh God, save me." He managed to swing back around and hold on tight to those rocks again. There was no choice. They couldn't go down because the tide was already in. And how were they going to go up? Well, they were pretty far up by now. And the oldest brother, he looked up and he thought, maybe I can just jump up and slither over the edge. Well, he got his hands on a little tiny handhold, and he tried to pull himself up. But he couldn't. They made their way back down to some of those little shelves that were bigger. And he thought, I don't know what we can do. We have no choice but to go up. So Craig, he tried it. He was younger, but he was a little more agile than the other boys. He got to that place where they'd stopped before, and he wasn't as heavy, and he reached up and he got a handhold, and he tried to push himself up a little further, and he saw something over here, and he got a hold of that, and then he took himself, and he tried, he reached, but he couldn't reach. But the other two boys got below Craig, and they started pushing him up, and it was just far enough that he was able to grab onto a little scrawny bush that was hanging over the edge, and with both hands he pulled, and with his feet he started to push, and the boys pushed him up, and he went right over the edge. Well then, after getting his brother up, he thought, well, maybe I can do it now. So he started climbing again, and Brett came climbing right up behind him. And when he got to the point that he knew there wasn't much to hold on to, Brett got under him and said, I'll push you up. So very carefully, the older brother started grabbing anything that he could see, and Brett started to push him. And then his brother hung over the cliff and got him by the hands. And with Brett pushing, And Craig, pulling the older brother, went over the top and landed on the grass. Oh, he just lay there. That was really awful. But then they had a problem. Brett was littler. And there was nobody down there to push him up. They thought, what can we do? But Brett scurried up on the little rock ledges that he could get to. And pretty soon he was at the point where the other boys had been either pushed or pulled up. And he stood there. There appeared to be nothing for him to grab. And then the boys were hanging over the edge, sticking out their hands, trying to get a hold of Brett, when there was the sound of running feet and a man's voice, and he said, "What are you boys doing?" And then he looked over the edge and he saw Brett hanging there. And he said, "You guys get out of the way." And he flopped down on his stomach and he hung over the edge and he got a hold of Brett's hands and he pulled him up over that edge. And he looked at them and he said, "Didn't you boys see the signs down there? It said this is a danger zone. 6 months ago, 2 boys about your age fell to their deaths from here. There's a road to go up to here. You didn't need to climb this." They were ashamed. And he said, "Well, that's over. Come on, I'll show you where the road is so you can get back down to your parents." Well, there was 2 very repentant and thankful boys. As they went down that quite easy road to go around the cliffs, all they could think about was sending their heart's pleas up to God, thanking Him for saving them, and asking God to forgive them for not paying any attention to what their father said. That in life, as you go on your way, that you will look for the signs that people have put out that tell you there's danger. And if you'll read your Bibles, God tells us what we should and shouldn't do, just like our parents, because all of them love us. Thank you, boys and girls, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.